Well, the haters gonna hate, 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 and the fakers gonna fake, 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 baby. I'm just gonna making luck, a Dominion podcast.
If you're listening to this,
Welcome to Making
probably
Luck, a Dominion
a
podcast.
Dominion podcast. Yeah. So you may have heard that Adam is come back from the adventure of his lifetime.
It really was the adventure of a lifetime. Like maybe you're trying to be grandiose, but like it really was that. It was amazing.
No, I'm not exaggerating.
Okay.
Are you allowed to talk about it now?
Yeah, I can say whatever I want now. Like
So why don't you tell us where you've been?
So I applied for the CBS show Survivor I applied for it for 6 years and they never called me back. And it's something I've always wanted. And then I found this. It's a live game. It's run by fans, and it takes place in the woods in Northwest Tennessee. And these people they just put on a Survivor game, and so this game had 24 people in it, and we all went and lived in the woods for 8 days. Well, some of us shorter than that. I made it to day 7.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's pretty. You made it pretty far.
Yeah. So no one gets eliminated until day 3. But, there's several eliminations on each day. And I made it to ninth place out of 24. I made the jury. I made the merge. I won an individual immunity challenge. It was raining incredibly hard for the first, 5 days of the game. Like, Tropical Storm Barry just went right through. I think by the time it got to us, it was reduced to a tropical depression. But it rained so much. There was so much mud. The wood was so incredibly soaked, we couldn't get a fire going after day 2. So there was just no hope of staying dry. It was completely physically miserable. Without a fire, we couldn't eat. So I just went days at a time without eating. And when I did, it was just like this tiny bit of rice. It was absolutely amazing. It was everything I wanted it to be. I got to play Survivor. I got to meet people. I got to make some alliances. I got to vote people out. I'm going to have friends for life. And you want to know the kicker?
What's the kicker?
Everyone sees me as a hero that game because I played the game. This is so weird because I played the game with my heart and I played the game with integrity and I just was myself without any filter. And they're all telling me that I'm a hero. And I didn't expect that.
Yeah, my internet went out, so I'm about I completely understand. I had a very similar experience because I didn't have internet for a day or two.
Yeah.
So I got you, man.
Yeah. I spent 6 nights there and I basically didn't sleep.
Yeah.
So I was hallucinating at points because of lack of sleep. It was actually kind of cool.
I also actually went out of town recently, over this last weekend. Well, last week or so. Traveled. But I stayed in a hotel. So I kind of can relate to your story
I
in
slept
a way,
on the
right?
ground.
I also was away from home. I also lacked some of, the comforts that I had, come to know and love. After I ate the Andes mints that they left on my pillow, I never got any more.
Oh no!
After day 1, so I only got 1 day's worth of Andes mints. Yeah, and I had to go to Adam had to trudge through the mud and couldn't keep his feet dry. I had to be in this really boring seminar for work. This was you can really draw some parallels here.
Yeah, and so I think you
and I think the question on all of our minds, though, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna ask, is what came back from the woods really Adam?
That's
can we be sure?
That's actually a really good question, because I mean, this was so draining, right? I mean, it was physically draining, obviously, but Survivor is a really tough game, and these people really came to play, and I would imagine I got played super hard, right? I mean,
did you?
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
nice.
And it was emotionally draining for me. It was mentally draining. It was all the above. I got back yesterday. And the game ended. The game ended for me on Friday, which was 3 days ago. I got back yesterday, and I've just been. I mean, I took today off work. I'm going to take tomorrow off work. I'm not even ready to go back into work. I'm just so incredibly drained. I can't even think about like being on Survivor again because I'm just so exhausted. I can't even think about playing Dominion. Like I opened up Dominion, I was like, I don't want to do this right now. I don't want to do
Yeah.
anything that's competitive in any way. Like
Yeah.
I'm just done for now, and I just need a long time to recover in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and which, get that. And so maybe you've gathered by now that this intro means that you're about to hear a mini-sode. Woo! Of Making Luck, a Dominion podcast. But yeah, so we have some content to roll out in the meantime, and we'll be back in full swing eventually. But right now, we both, Adam needs some time to recover, and I for sure need some time to recover.
Yeah.
So
You had it way worse than I did, so.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so this
Yeah.
is going to be a mini-sode. I can't tell you when I'm going to be back. Like if you asked me if it was next week, I would say it's doubtful.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I know.
But we have content in the meantime, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I'm pretty sure I know what episode we want to do when we get back, because I believe that a lot of the things that I learned from my experience playing a competitive game, Survivor, and actually a lot of the things that Jake has been going through recently, with regards to Dominion, I think could be relevant for that episode. And
Sure.
I mean, we're having discussions about the immediate future of the podcast and what's going on, but like also for the long term, like we've been doing this for a year and a half without missing a single episode, which is amazing, right?
Yeah.
But at some point, we don't want to just burn through all of our mini-sodes if we want to take some kind of extended break, which I think both of us realize is something that we need to do, right, Jake?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that for both of us, this is. I mean, Adam, you've been a content creator for ever.
It's been a minute.
With Dominion, but like this is kind of the hardest, the most consistent and rigorous content creation that like you've done, right? With the podcast, it's at least the most structured.
I would say,
and this is the first, and it's the only content creator thing. I've done some content creation before this, but nothing really on this scale. And I think we're learning a lot about what that is like. And when I obviously we all have content creators we look up to. And I've noticed like they all have will take breaks from the thing that they create content about, from creating content, and when they come back they're like, oh my god, I needed that so badly. You kind of get it. Yeah, you need to take some time off sometimes. And so obviously we don't want to leave you guys high and dry without content long term or anything, but yeah, we've thought about maybe giving the podcast an off season. But if we do, we'll definitely be back in full swing at some point.
This podcast, it's important to me. Dominion is important to me, and I don't think either of those things are going to change in the long term. But I think I think it's fair to have an off season, or to at least have the option of having an off season, and especially at this point in both of our lives, it may be coming up in the near future, but for now there's just going to be something every week, right? Whether it be a mini-sode or two, and then an episode that we want to talk about that I think is very relevant to this from a competitive standpoint, even if it's not super Dominion specific, but it still matters.
Yeah, for sure. So we hope you enjoy the mini-sode, and you will hear from us again someday. Someday soon.
Yeah, I haven't even logged on to the Discord all that much, and that's because my Facebook has been blowing up. The game was streamed live on Facebook. I know the video quality isn't that great because it's live streamed, and maybe someday there will be something a little more high quality because it was filmed in higher quality than what you see on the Facebook videos. But again, I'll link to the Facebook page of the game I played in the description. You can watch everything that happened to me, and I mean, that's you can
laugh.
You can laugh, you can cry, you can really cry.
You can really laugh too. Yeah.
My wife said she was proud of the game I played, and that's really all that matters.
Yeah.
You can be proud of it, or you can call it embarrassing. I don't really care. But and that's sort of where I've been living. My Facebook has been blowing up, and you can friend me on Facebook too. That contact information has always been there. I encourage it. We can talk about Dominion. We can talk about Survivor, just competitive things in general, life. I have a lot of friends from the Dominion community. In fact, I'm going to a wedding this coming weekend of someone I met in the Dominion community. Shout outs to A. Hoppy. Guest podcast
Congrats.
host. Yeah.
I didn't know he was getting married.
Yes.
Tell him congrats for me.
Yeah, he's getting married on this coming Saturday, and we'll be there in Pennsylvania. Me and the wife and the baby. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
We even got a new kitten.
Hey,
Yes.
Hand him in a state for me, and tell him it's my wedding gift.
Oh, actually, I will do that. I can do that.
Pass him in a state. He'll know what it means.
So savage.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. But in any case, thank you for listening. We'll be back sometime.
Yeah.
And hope you enjoy it.
All right.
Welcome to Making Luck, a fast food podcast.
Right, a fast food industry podcast.
Yeah.
And we are actually going to do an episode that is on the best card in Dominion, Adam's favorite card, Silver. And
wait, we haven't done a Stewart episode yet. What are you talking about?
Yeah, no, this is an episode about Silver. No, it's an episode about Feodum.
Feodum with the silver.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, Feodum is alt VP that goes into the kingdom.
It's a 4-cost victory card from the Dark Ages expansion. It says it's worth 1 VP per 3 silvers you have, rounding down. And then it also says when you trash this, gain 3 silvers.
Ooh.
Yeah, isn't that spicy?
Yeah, so this is an interesting card because it's one of those cards that no matter what your skill level was at the time that you read this card, wheels started turning. I guarantee that. This is one of those thought-provoking cards that you immediately pick it up, and it just opens up a huge strategic space in your mind of, when is this good? Is this good? What do I do with this? What is this?
I remember when Dark Ages first came out, and this was just after I was getting into Dominion seriously. I started getting into it around the time Hinterlands came out. I still didn't have all of the expansions for my IRL set yet, and Dark Ages just came out, and I was at the game store, and there was a guy who bought it, and he had a base cards brick, and so I was playing with this guy. I'd never met him before, and we were playing a Dark Ages only kingdom, and I remember there were 2 games, and both of them the trash pile ended up larger than I'd ever seen it, but that's Dark Ages for you.
Yeah, which is great.
One of the games I opened Rats. That was pretty cool.
Nice.
And the other game I opened Hermit Feodum.
Okay.
I was like, I want some silvers.
Yeah.
Give me some silvers.
Yeah.
I'm going to open Hermit Feodum. And I trashed my Feodum out of the discard pile on turn 4.
Nice.
Lost that game.
Okay. So that gets us into what this episode's about, right? Which is Feodum, yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So, it's easy to look at Feodum from hugely far up and just say, this is alt VP, and it's below the duchy price point.
So I think that means that if you have $4 and you want points, you should think about getting Feodum.
Yeah, it's worth a consideration. Now, there's also this point where you look at a kingdom and see that Feodum is in it, and that kind of determines what kind of deck you're going to build. Now, or it at least affects the deck building decisions that you make, and that's really rare for Feodum. I'd say, outside of designed kingdoms, or at least outside of some very particular synergies, it's really uncommon for Feodum to be particularly important to the kind of deck you end up building.
Okay, so
that's Adam's "you're wrong and here's why" voice.
No, yeah. I mean, I would say you're right, but just, the way you think about things and the way you describe them is, I know, it might be a little bit strong for me.
Sure.
There are 4 things out there that we'll talk about later that are really, really good for Feodum, and that's just what you're doing that game.
Right.
Outside of those 4, I think there's a lot of use case for Feodum affecting the way you build your deck. I think a lot of it revolves around the on-trash ability, for sure.
Yeah.
Just being able to shove 3 silvers in your deck by trashing a Feodum can be really good for building.
Right.
And I think that by itself is a big deal, but then also, like, just the fact that there's another pile of points there, sometimes that's all you need, man.
Yeah, so I think the biggest discussion for Feodum, not necessarily the thing you use it for most often, but the most room for discussion with Feodum is when you're talking about using it for points. Now, I said that it's really rare for Feodum to affect the kind of deck that you end up building, or the kind of deck that's best, just because it's there. That's not because it's hard to make Feodum worth a decent amount of points. That's because that Feodum gets to be worth a decent amount of points when you have a bunch of silvers in your deck. And a deck...
I love silver.
Right, a deck that has a bunch of silvers is really good at buying provinces.
I love using silvers to buy provinces.
So it's not that it's hard to make Feodum worth points, it's that by the time you've done that, you have to decide, should I just buy provinces instead? And, like, a lot of the time the answer is going to be yes.
So, I think if there was one sentence of advice that I could give someone about Feodum, I can only give them one sentence. I would say that the best Feodum decks can also buy provinces.
Right.
And that doesn't mean you go for only provinces. I mean, you get them both, right? But if you go for Feodum and you just go for Feodum, then you're going to lose to the guy who goes for Feodum and also province.
I'd say most of the time that's true. There are a few cases that we'll get into where Feodum can be worth more points than province, and a lot of the time province ends up filling like a similar role that Duchy fills a lot of the time, where the provinces end up tie-breaking. But
Duchy's older brother.
Right. But that's kind of rare because, and we'll get into like typical enablers for it and the math you need to do to decide whether or not that's going to happen.
Love math.
Basically understand that it's really not very often worth it to shove more silver into the deck than you would normally just so that you can make Feodum better. It's normally better to build the best deck you can and then decide whether or not Feodum are a good source of points from you based on the position you're in.
Right. I mean, if I'm thinking about Feodum in terms of not these bonkers enablers that are like just, oh, masterpiece Feodum, like if I'm not on that level, then if I don't want silver in the deck, it's rare for me to want to put silver in the deck just for the sake of making future Feodums better.
Yeah.
I would probably be better served by building a really good deck that's good at what it does, and then if I think I'm going to be behind, do the calculation then, just figure out what situation you're in, and if I'm going to need Feodum points to win, then, make sure you have the resources to slow your opponent down if you need to do that, and, then go ahead and add those silvers.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about really, I think one way to hammer in this point is to compare Feodum to the other two counting VP in Dominion, which are Vineyard and Silk Road. And you think about Vineyard is a high-scoring alt VP that counts cards, and the deck that you build to play to Vineyard and maximize Vineyard is usually a really competent deck at doing a lot of other things.
Yeah, normally the person who plays more action cards wins the game.
That's true.
And so if you have a lot of action cards in your deck... Yeah.
And a Silk Road deck also is kind of the opposite. It tends not to be very good at doing a lot of other things, but Silk Road is potentially worth so many points that it's sometimes worth affecting your deck building to play to Silk Road. Whereas Feodum kind of becomes the awkward middle child of those three. So it's
like Ron Weasley.
Right. It's rarely worth that many points. Like, it's rarely going to be worth as much
it's not
as
worth like 55
provinces
points.
Or anything. And a deck full of silvers is great for buying provinces, but it's not flexible. It doesn't have extra gains or anything. So by the time you've made significant progress to starting to build to Feodum, you're probably at the point where you just buy provinces anyway. So that's what we mean by saying you don't decide on your deck based on the presence of Feodum. You look at where your deck is and decide whether or not to buy Feodum from there.
It's like you don't choose your wand. The wand chooses you, right?
Yeah. If Feodum is your wand. You don't choose Feodum. Feodum chooses you.
Yeah. I think that's basically it there.
Whereas, like, you think about Vineyard or Silk Road, like, you might choose to play to those at the beginning. Feodum is a decision you make later on in the game.
So I think a big factor, I mean, in the abstract, I think this is, I mean, you're right about this. I think the Ron Weasley analogy, hashtag Ron Weasley analogy, is pretty good for describing Feyda in a general sense. I think there are a few things that change the game. Yes. One of them we're about to get to. The other one, I think, is a little bit relevant. I mean, if I have all the money in the world because I have a bunch of silvers, then, you know, you're going to buy the card that's worth the most points to you. And if it's hard for me to get a billion more silvers, then my Feyda are not going to be worth as much as provinces. Okay, now I'm in this situation. There's another factor to the card.
Yeah.
Feodum costs $4.
Yeah.
And province costs 8.
Yes.
So if I'm swimming in buys, I can get 2 Feyda. Or I can play my workshop, I can game a Feodum, and then I can buy my province because I got my silver. Boy, howdy.
Boy, howdy. And actually, that brings up a really important point to this. A lot of the time the conversation thus far has been assuming single gains, sort of, and that's because the deck that is flooded with silvers can't reliably line up whatever its plus buy or gainer is with the money that it has.
Don't you tell me what my deck can and can't do.
A lot of the time. It's harder for it to do that. That's when I talk about, like, compare it to a deck that's played to Vineyard. The Vineyard deck is pretty flexible because it has all these actions and these things that are gaining multiple cards a lot of the time. Whereas the Feodum deck, it has a really hard time lining up its ability to gain multiples.
Okay, so, I'm still not over, like, how seriously you said boy howdy. Like, that was
right.
really good.
So
that was really good. You were really trying to keep us on track, and I'm still...
Yeah, I know. He's doing his best. But Adam makes a really good point that...
if you're spending $8 or more on a Feodum, that feels bad. Mm-hmm. And that should feel bad, because that's bad. Mm-hmm. So try not to do that.
But it changes a little bit when you can reliably have multiple gains, even though you're drawing through a bunch of silvers.
Yeah. If there was only some way to, like, get a buy every turn, like maybe you princed something, or like maybe you have traveling fair in the kingdom, or like maybe there's cobbler or something. I don't know.
Plus buy that's like in the kingdom that you don't have to draw to be able to enable is a lot of the time a good enabler for Feodum, and it's part of why one of the best enablers for Feodum is one of the best enablers for it, and that's Masterpiece.
Sure. I think a lot of the hallmarks of the best enablers for Feodum, hashtag best enablers for Feodum, registered trademark, is the fact that they allow you to continue getting more silvers.
Or Feyda.
Right.
Yeah, but mostly the silvers.
I mean, these ones do focus around the silvers. By just playing more silvers. So I'm looking at the three, the big three.
Yeah.
The Trinity, if you will. Like Trinity from the Matrix.
Yes.
Yeah, like her. And so if you put these 3 cards together in the right configuration, you can actually make a mosaic that looks like Trinity from the Matrix. I don't know if you were aware of that.
No, I didn't.
But we're really hitting the important topics
here. We'll put a screenshot of that
on Making Luck, a Trinity podcast.
Yeah.
So there's Masterpiece, and there's Delve, and then there's Raid.
Yes. And I'd say that Masterpiece and Delve are a cut above Raid for this.
I think the 2 of them are the strongest Feodum enablers in the game.
These have the common theme of 1, being prodigious silver gainers, but 2, being prodigious silver gainers that don't require you to draw something and play it in order to have multiple gains. These are multiple gains that are in the kingdom that you can enable simply by either, playing the silver or just, playing your deck out normally without having to draw a plus buy piece.
I mean, I know the spirit of what you're trying to say. Technically, Raid needs you to draw and play silver to gain you more silvers. Mm-hmm. I think the important thing is that you can gain a buttload of silvers here, and you can continue to gain more buttloads of silvers by by having a deck that's full of a buttload of silvers.
Right.
So I think maybe these are like the buttload of silver Trinity.
Yeah, the buttload of silver Trinity, and they're the gainers that...
T-bossed, for sure.
Right. They're the gainers that get you a bunch of silver by having a bunch of silvers. That's what makes them really convenient for Feodum.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know this, but having a bunch of silver is really good for Feodum.
Yeah.
It's also really good for having a good deck. And
buying provinces, which we went into earlier.
Yeah, imagine that.
Yeah, so those are the things that you look at, and if those are out with Feodum, those are keys to you that the Feodum might actually be worth playing around. Like, it's usually not worth altering your deck building for Feodum, but one of these three, really these two, Raid requires a lot of setup, but Masterpiece and Delve mean that Feodum might end up being worth more than Province. And that means that you could kind of potentially make it to the point where you build to it instead of buying provinces.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think both Masterpiece and Delve in the Kingdom justify seriously considering making Feodum worth a whole bunch of points.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think they're... What?
The benchmark is like, can you get 18 or more silvers by the end of the game? And with the answer, with these cards in the Kingdom, the answer is a lot of the time yes. Because that makes Feodum kind of strictly better than Province, other than that it doesn't end the game. Because if it's worth 6 and it has options to grow, well, Province doesn't have options to grow.
Yeah, it's a grower, not a shower.
Well, it's both.
That's true, actually. It's both. Wow. Feodum's so cool. So if I'm looking for support for these kinds of decks, it's a lot of the stuff we mentioned before. If there are ways to gain Feoda that don't take up your buy, those are super great, because then you don't have to spend $12 on a Feodum when you're out of silvers to gain, or it's time to move into the end game, which feels bad, or any sort of way that you can gain a Feodum and also give up your silvers. So there's that synergy. I think more ways to draw more silvers are going to accelerate your growth here. So I'm going to look towards any type of draw, but even like those draw cards that normally require village support, even without the village support, they can get here. So I'm looking at like Council Room. It's super great because it draws you a buttload of silver, and then it also gives you that extra buy so you can slap on a Feodum at the end. Yeah,
that's like best case scenario. We get into like Council Room, Margrave or Tragic Hero too. Those are also really good culprits for this. The other things are draw cards that capitalize on increased treasure density, like we're talking about Storyteller or Stables at that point too, and those are pretty good.
They're like, they're okay.
They're not as good as these other things.
They're not nearly as good as those other things, yeah. I also want to say that, like, other forms of draw, even besides this stuff, like, just build a deck that draws itself, and then that transitions into getting a whole bunch of silvers this way. Often that is the best build path for you, because building a deck that draws itself is really super great. And then if you decide, hey, maybe I can just win the game because I can get enough provinces here and close the game out, or maybe I have pile control, you get those options as well. So, like, even if it's King's Court, even if you're building this super crazy thing, like a lot of these enablers like Masterpiece, Delve, Raid, these are going to give you the options of quickly transitioning into a deck that makes 1 billion points with Feodum.
Yeah. So there is another pretty strong enabler for Feodum, and it's a strong enabler for a different reason, kind of, and that's Trader.
Yeah.
Trader is interesting because you would look at Trader, and it doesn't actually gain as much silver as reliably as those other three that we talked about, but Trader can trash Feodum and gain 7 silvers that way.
So, yeah, I think the support you're looking for with Trader is much different than the support you're looking for that I was just talking about.
The deck is different, but not necessarily less powerful. The deck enables Feodum in a way that's probably not as good as these other things that we talk about, but is still pretty good and plays very differently.
So, if I'm looking for support for Feodum, or Trader Feodum, I'm thinking about, first of all, just having a deck that can generate a lot of buys. If I buy a bunch of coppers or curses and have a Trader in hand, it's a great way to flood with silver quickly. Also, expensive cards that I can trash to my Trader.
Yes.
Can get me a lot of silvers easily in that case. So, like, Feodum is really a good example here. But also pretty much anything expensive that maybe you don't have use for. So, like, I'm thinking about those bulky $7 trashers, like your Forge and your Expand or whatever. Like, maybe you're done with those and it's time to go. Or, like, even Ig or something like that.
Yeah, Trader's also really good if you're going for Feodum and your opponent is junking you for, whatever reason. because you can get
Trader's a good
silvers
card.
instead of the thing. Yeah. Or if you have a bunch of buys, you don't care about money because you can spend all the buys on copper and reveal Trader and get silver instead.
That feels good, man.
Yeah.
It's just a different flavor of deck. I would say that without some kind of support like that, I'm gonna be hard pressed to just go for Trader Feodum without that support.
Trader Feodum doesn't stand on its own legs just by itself. It's a potentially powerful enabler, but it's not like Masterpiece or Delve, where it can kind of by itself make Feodum strong enough to go for.
Right, and I want to say that Raid also has that same problem. Without support, I'm not just playing Raid Feodum.
Yeah.
With Masterpiece and Delve, it's probably a different story, and the support for those guys is a little more broad.
Yeah, and I mean the support is kind of coded into what Feodum is, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hashtag synergy.
So, it is also probably worth talking about when you're going for Feodum instead of like a duchy, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, if I have less than 5, I'm not going to go for duchy. So that was easy.
Right.
You figure out if Feodum is better than a state, and then you get it. So that was easy. But yeah, let's say you have 5, and maybe you want to get Feodum instead of duchy.
Yeah, if you're going to have 9 silvers by the end of the game, it's strictly better, obviously, to get the Feodum.
Sure, and a lot of... so I think a lot of the stronger support for Feodum comes in ways that you can trash Feodum to build.
Yeah.
Right, and those decks will naturally have you having some number of silvers in your deck, like maybe 3, or maybe 6, or maybe 9, like, because it gives you 3 silvers every time. So, like, 6 is not a crazy number to do that. So, like, if you buy Feodum in your endgame, and you've got Upgrade Feodum is super great, by the way. But all I have to do is just shove a few more Feodum in my deck, and I have options to upgrade that Feodum into something that's good, that costs 5, right?
Yeah.
But it also boosts the amount that my other Feodum are worth.
Yes.
So, I mean, at that point, you'll have to do the calculation in a little bit of a different way. If I trash this Feodum, am I going to get points? Because even though I lost the points for that one Feodum, I boosted all the rest of them by 1, and maybe that was more points than I lost.
Yeah, so this kind of transitions into another, I think, important point. And we come back to these crazy boards where Feodum becomes super important with silver. And we talk about splits, and we assume that the silvers are going to pile, and the Feodum are going to pile, and we try to figure out which one is more important. And we try to come up with some rules, and I read some articles that gave some rules on what's more important, winning the silver split or winning the Feodum split. And I don't actually think there's much useful advice that you can give that's going to apply across the board. You kind of just need to do the calculations to decide whether to prioritize Feodum or silver, because there's arguments for both.
Sure, it depends on how many Feodum you and your opponents have, how many silvers you and your opponents have, and more importantly, how easy it is for each of you to get more of them.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Like, I want to quote the article that came out by Wiro recently on Feodum, and by the way, I like the article overall, but he says one thing that I think is the reason I don't like this statement is illustrative to me to how you play to Feodum. And he points out that if you get 27 silvers, and he advocates for prioritizing the silver pile always. And if you say, if you get 27 silvers and 3 Feodum, that's 27 VP. That beats an opponent that has 13 silvers and 5 Feodum. So even though you lost the Feodum split and won the silver split, you win. What's wrong with that?
How did you win the silver split by 14? 14 silvers. Like, you're gonna win no matter what you do.
What was your opponent doing?
Like, what happened here?
So it's a contrived scenario is the important part.
It doesn't sound like that game was close. But also, like, what were you and what were your opponent doing? I mean, really, at some point when you decided to get more silvers instead of more Feodum, you figured out that was to your benefit based on the current game situation. Yes. I think that's probably what happened.
Overall, I do want to say, I'm not bashing the Wiro article. I like it a lot.
It's actually a good article. As of right now, it's scheduled to be published on the Dominion Strategy blog. So
yeah, you can read it on FDS now, and you'll read it on the Dominion Strategy blog.
I'm hoping we'll be able to link it by the time it gets published, but no promises. Sorry about that.
But yeah, so it's important to... The point is that you read advice like that, and the real takeaway is that you need to think about how to prioritize silver or the Feodum pile based on your current situation and how easy it is to get the two and what situation you find yourself in.
I think that things get weird in mirrors in Dominion.
Mm-hmm.
And this is no exception. I mean, Feodum gets weird in mirrors. A lot of times, it's easy to lose sight of this. It's easy to just assume that your opponent is competent and you're going to play a mirror. When I've learned that that's the case after seeing what we're both doing is when I start to think about that. So it's a little bit tough to talk about without the context of a game. But in a two-player game, at least, you have to think about what things are like when they're uncontested. And I think Feodum is a great example of that.
Yes.
If I only have access to 4 Feoda in the pile, then I'm probably not going to be trashing any Feoda. I'm going to be really heavily leaning on those silver gainers to get me my points, and I'm going to need to get all the VP out of the Feodum, because trashing 1 Feodum to make 3 other Feoda worth 1 more point is just never going to be worth it if these were worth going for in the first place.
Sure.
If I have access to 8 Feoda, that changes a lot of things.
Yeah.
I can start to get mileage out of the idea that I can put a Feodum in my deck, and if I'm contested, I have options. I can either just trash them and build a different deck if that's available, or I can keep them in my deck and maybe play this mirror if I think it's advantageous to me.
Yeah.
I think opening up options of trashing Feoda to get the silvers, because silvers are good for other things, is something that usually only is relevant in an actual game of Dominion if you're not contested. But it does need to enter your mind when you're thinking about how good is Feodum here.
Yeah.
So it depends a little bit on what you're trashing
Feodum
with. I mentioned upgrade before, and I think that's, numero uno, primo, star of the show here, right? And there's a lot of other great things that promote strategies like this.
Yeah. So there are some aspects of using Feodum for the idea that it gains silvers for you, and for the most part, for that to be good early on, you really need some fast-paced, excellent trashing that gives you control over your deck, because what you don't want to be doing is trashing the Feodum instead of something else, because trashing a Feodum to gain 3 silvers probably doesn't put you as far ahead as like trashing an estate and making your deck better that way. So you're looking for things that give you that really quick control over your deck to make trashing Feodum good as a silver gainer. So we're talking about like Chapel and Donate, things like that.
A lot of times you're building those decks with the super strong trashing, and a great way to... those decks really like having a good way to increase their payload quickly.
Mm-hmm.
If I have 2 cards in my deck, Chapel and Feodum, I'm probably going to be okay, because next turn I can make 6, and I'm going to be doing okay, rather than having to slow down on my thinning, keep my coppers around, trash them a little slower. A lot of times this can be clunkier. And Donate, it just all happens in one swell foop. Hashtag swell foop.
Like, if you really want to, you can open Feodum Donate and have that deck on turn 3.
It's great. Like, you're in a great spot. Maybe you'll be able to do better depending on what other support is there.
Yeah, sure.
But these synergies are there because they help you trash the other cards, and Feodum's silver gain is welcome.
Yeah.
Deck.
So the really important thing is that you don't want to be trashing the Feodum at the cost of trashing something else, at least early on. So you're looking for either really strong trashing, or you're looking for some weird little tricks that let you do it without being at the cost of trashing something else. So if you have a Watchtower in your hand and you buy a Feodum, you can reveal a Watchtower and trash the Feodum and effectively just buy 3 silvers for $4.
You can top deck the silvers! Ha!
You can also top deck them, yeah. Or Salt the Earth. Opening Salt the Earth and trashing Feodum gets you a point and 3 silvers. That's usually a pretty strong opener.
It's pretty hot, man.
Yeah.
I love silver.
Yeah.
So, these are the good ones. There's a couple of them that, I might tip my hat to, but for reasons Jake said are not going to be as good. I'm looking at Hermit and Jack of all trades.
Mm-hmm.
Both of these can help you gain more silvers, although they're not as prolific as the other guys, for sure.
Yeah.
But, eventually these guys are going to run out of estates to trash.
Yeah.
And maybe you can use this as a silver gainer.
The key there, and I want to come back to this again, is that if you are playing the Jack and you're choosing between trashing a Feodum and an estate, you're sad. So don't put yourself in that position. Don't let it get there.
Right. So I'm thinking about maybe a deck where I have a good chance of lining up my Feodum with something that can trash it, and also less of a chance of lining my trasher up with something else because they're already gone, like in a state.
Yeah.
And I think in Hermit's case, it's kind of a, you look at your situation and you're thinking, hey, I have $4 now and I haven't seen my Hermit yet this shuffle. Golly gee willikers, I could buy a Feodum and find my Hermit and then trash the Feodum from the discard. I never even have to draw the stinking thing.
Yeah.
And I've just bought 3 silvers for $4. And so Hermit is Hermit's nice.
Yeah.
Hermit's a good card, and it's from the same expansion. Woo!
Synergy.
#synergy.
Yeah.
So yeah, Feodum. I like the card. It makes me happy.
Yeah, it's neat. It gets the wheels turning. Yeah. And a lot of the time you just ignore it.
Well, yeah, that too.
And that's a great conclusion to leave off on.
Yeah, well, anyway, thanks for putting up with this mini-sode. I'm sure both of us are doing, at least one of us is doing something much more important than recording a podcast right now. So hopefully you're enjoying having this content.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm probably playing Slay the Spire or something.
Yeah, and I'm probably being defecated on.
Not by Slay the Spire or by Dominion, but by an actual human.
Yeah, if it was by Slay the Spire or Dominion, I would probably be speaking metaphorically.
Yeah.
And it would be like my deck that's defecating on me.
This isn't one of those things that's like... I mean, it's consensual. Like, it's
it is.
Where he's talking about it being like a human child. Not like... It's his human...
My human child.
But
I contributed to this.
I
signed up for this.
It's not illegal either. Okay, I don't have anything to say to this.
I'm not going to say that all parties involved are consenting adults.
Yeah.
However...
Which, like, if that's happening too, that's fine. That's Adam's conversation with his...
Consenting adult.
Consenting adult.
Yeah.
We didn't even imply that is happening. But
this podcast took a turn, didn't it?
But it's not to say, like, if that
Don't
kind of
kink
thing,
shame, okay?
If that kind of thing were happening, I wouldn't judge. Is all I'm saying.
That's right.
This is a safe place.
Yeah.
And
Making luck, a safe podcast.
It's a safe podcast, and you can talk about anything you want here.
Hopefully you're wearing your seatbelt.
Mostly it's Dominion.
Yeah. Sometimes it's not. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
I remember when I was working there, I was 16 years old, and my first year working there, they actually made the switch to 100% white meat chicken. And this was in response to pink slime. People found out what pink slime was and all the sawdust and things that were in the nuggets. And
yeah.
Yeah, but before that...
Just Google that.
Yeah. You probably don't need incognito.
Yeah,
right?
or don't Google it because
NSFL.
Yeah, right. This might just be one of those things you're better off not knowing.
But before that, there were actually white meat and dark meat nuggets.
Yeah.
And some people would ask for, I want dark meat only or I want white meat only, which it doesn't mean that it was all white meat. It was just that there was, more white meat along with the other additives. But you could tell the difference by the shape of the nugget. So the egg-shaped nuggets were the dark meat, and then the ones with the little kind of knobby at the top, those were the white meat nuggets. And they've kept the two shapes, and it's all meat now. Don't worry about it. Pretty much anything you get fried at McDonald's is
at this point.
It's way better than the regular meat. I'll tell you.
Oh my god,
yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah.